everyone. We are so excited because we are talking about Women's History Month today. And we know that Women's History Month is dedicated to commemorating women in history. And today, and in the past, who keep making strides for advocating for inclusion, gender equity, and women empowerment.
And today we will focus on learning and celebrating women who have been broken barriers with their passion journey and persistent in advocating for gender equity. There are still many gaps in access to opportunities, decision-making power, and issues we still face today, including discrimination, withheld opportunities for education, the right to vote, and earning a fair and equal gig. My name is Fely Garcia Lopez, and I'm one of the Educator Innovation Leads, and it is an honor to be here with you all. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Es un gran honor que estén aquí con ustedes, con nosotros, nuestra comunidad.
And I'm Jornea Armant, Head of Engagement at Flipgrid, and we are so honored you are here with us today or watching the recording in the future. Our mission at Flipgrid is to empower every learner on the planet to share their voice and respect the diverse voices of others, because we know that will build global empathy. And today's conversation will help continue us empower all voices. And you can actively join in today's Flipgrid conversation about race, equity, and justice as we celebrate the accomplishments of women who persisted beyond discrimination and inequities and explore ways that we can all achieve equality through our work in women's empowerment by sharing your ideas or questions in the chat and by tagging at Flipgrid, at Penguin Class, or using the hashtag FlipGridForAll in your social posts.
Y tengo el inmenso placer de informarles that today we are joined by 4 incredible authors of the She Persisted book series, a series about inspirational women who persisted to become great successes in their fields and a force in our mundo, in our world. So let's meet the authors.
All right, well, welcome Kelly, Christine, and Meg. We are super excited to have you join us. Let's take a moment to learn a little bit about you and the woman that you chose to amplify in your writing, and maybe why they are important in history. So let's start with Christine.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, I am Christine. I wrote She Persisted, Maria Tallchief. Maria was the very first American prima ballerina. She was also the first Native American prima ballerina, and she grew up in Oklahoma and in Los Angeles, and she was a citizen of the Osage Nation who went on to perform on some of the grandest and oldest ballet stages all across Europe and across the world. And so she faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of folks who didn't understand what it meant for her to be a Native woman in these spaces, but she still persisted and worked so hard and achieved so much. And many of the sort of major American ballet roles and parts in ballets like the Nutcracker were actually made for Maria. So it was a really incredible honor to share her story and to show this bit of dance history and Native history with young readers.
Beautiful. And so we're going to move on to Meg. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you wrote about.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Christine. I love these things because I always feel like I'm learning every time I'm presenting with another persister. So I'm Meg Medina, and I had the incredible honor of writing about Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. So Sonia Sotomayor, as many of you know, of course, is on the Supreme Court. She was the first Latina on the Supreme Court, and really only the third woman who had ever been chosen for the court. I found her story just amazing. As soon as I had the opportunity to write about her, I don't think the editor even finished asking me before I said, yes, I want to write about her. She's fascinating. And part of the thing that I find so fascinating about Sonia Sotomayor is that she and I are both New Yorkers. She was from the Bronx and I was from Queens. And as I was reading her memoir, My Beloved World, I kept thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I know exactly the neighborhood she's talking about. I have tias like this. This is exactly how it was at my house. You know, she was an ordinary girl with not, you know, who came from a neighborhood where there wasn't a lot of money, where there were, you know, some family problems that she had to deal with. And I could relate to all of them. So I think the thing that's amazing about Sonia Sotomayor is that she took all those things that could have been obstacles in her life, right? Her dad's alcoholism and lack of money, you know, people's stereotypes about Latinos, and she turned them into positives for herself and into things that like informed her and made her a more sort of equitable person, a person who really had fairness front and center in their mind. And she brings all of that, all of those gifts and experiences to the court, which is the highest court in the land. And so I just feel really excited to have written about her.
That's so phenomenal. You know, we will have some follow-up questions. We're going to pass it over to Kelly now. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you chose to write about.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Kelly Lyons, and I had the honor of writing about Coretta Scott King. And it was such a joy and a pleasure to get a chance to delve into her story. Often when we think about civil rights, men are the ones who are centered, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and they were essential and so monumental in the movement. But side by side with them were women like Mrs. Coretta Scott King, who was a visionary, a humanitarian, a leader, a singer, an orator, an author, and she deserves to have her story celebrated too. Some of the things that really spoke to me as I read and learned about her was the ways that she used her gifts to give back. Music was something that called to her from an early age. And one of her incredible contributions was creating freedom concerts, where she would go around the country and share the movement in story and song. And she'd be dressed in this stunning gown and take people from the Montgomery bus boycott to the March on Washington. It was like a poem, a diary, and a classical performance all wrapped into one. And every step of the way with, the sit-ins and pushing for equality and for justice, she was there. When Dr. King was killed, she was, just days later giving speeches. She pushed for us to have Dr. King Day as a national holiday, helped create the King Center. And so she is just this, shining light. And I'm so honored to have the chance to share her story with young readers.
Oh my goodness. As an educator and mother, both Fely and I think one thing that kept coming through my mind as each three of you were talking was, our students have a difficult time really seeing themselves if they can't, see what they, can be in the future, right? And so being able to tell these stories of incredible women of diverse backgrounds, making an impact not only on their own communities, but in society in general is so moving and so powerful. So I want to go back to something that Meg said today. You made a connection. You said, Sonia Sotomayor was from the same state that you were from. And when you said that, it was like this pride that was like filled up within you, right? And so I think I feel that same pride with both, really with all the authors. There has to be some type of connection, right? For us to really have this passion for us to write about. So I want to know a little bit more about those connections that really drew you to the people that you wrote about.
Yeah, I can start with that. Sure. So for me, growing up, I was also a dance student. I took ballet lessons at the Pacific Northwest Ballet School in Seattle for about 10 years growing up. I also traveled to the School of Ballet Chicago for a summer intensive program, which is something many young dance and ballet students will relate to, because that's just a big part of a dance education, is getting to audition and travel for different summer intensives. And so I actually first learned about Maria Tallchief when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I was at a summer intensive, and we had these history seminars as a part of our sort of summer curriculum alongside our more traditional technique and ballet classes. And so what we would do is we would gather in the studios, all the girls, we would just get in these little semicircles around a TV set that they would roll into the studio, and we would watch these historic clips of monumental dancers performing in some of their most iconic roles. And our teachers would give us these little handouts with some biographical information about these dancers and about the ballet that we were seeing. And so when I was just a kid, I got to see this recording of Maria Tallchief performing as the Firebird. And that is a ballet and a role that I reference in her biography. It was one of her most famous parts, and it was something that really helped to popularize ballet in America. And she was just incredible, how she moved. And I remember sitting, I think I was the only Native girl at my school that I knew of. And so when they said that she was the first American prima ballerina, and also she happened to be a Native American woman, that just always stayed with me, and I carried that memory for the rest of my life. And then when I was approached to join the series, just like Meg said, it was an immediate yes for me, because it really felt like a full circle moment in my life. And I was just so excited to learn more about her and to share her story.
So beautiful to be inspired and then to honor her in that way. That's incredible. I can't wait to find some video footage and watch her as Firebird. I've seen Misty Copeland, and so I know how incredible that dance is. And so,
It is.
Sonia, Kelly, any other connections that you have to the wonderful people that you wrote about?
I'm. Oh, go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say that Coretta Scott King, along with, music being so central in her life, it was also faith and family. And those are two, areas that I hold dear to. Growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, went to Brown Chapel AME. My mom sang in the choir. I learned how to play piano there from the First Lady of the church. We did a family concert once in front of the church. And just having that inner fortitude that faith gives you, and having that foundation that comes from your family, is something that I really connected with in Mrs. Coretta Scott King's story. And her using her gifts to find a way to make a difference. All of us have things that make us special. We're all blessed with, different kind of talents and different areas where we're called to give and that are our purpose. And I really connected with that, because as someone who always loved writing and comes from a family that valued storytelling, I can see how as a child, those seeds that are planted within you from people that are in your life, like your teachers and your family and your friends and the librarian, and how they bloom into who you're going to be one day. So as Coretta Scott King used her voice to give back in so many different ways, I try to use my writing voice in a similar way to make sure that kids feel seen and they feel heard and they feel loved, and that, everyone knows that their story matters.
Yes, everyone's story matters. And, I think for our students too, to bring their whole unique selves to the table every single day, they can make those connections in the classroom when we share about diverse perspectives, or have our students bring in people that they also find, because in my experience, in my education, it was very limited. There were certain people that you learned about during Black History Month. There were certain people you learned about during Women's History Month. And so we need to make sure that we expand those possibilities for our students so that they can connect. All right, Meg, you started this whole thing with that connection. So let's hear, what other connections do you have with Sonia?
Oh my goodness, so many. And I'll tell you, I met her. We got to do an event together in Texas, and we had a long talk about some of these things. So we were both girls growing up, first generation in this country. And so I could completely relate to things like, you know, language issues in the family, right? And economics, right? Like your parents working a lot and there not being enough money. Having to help support the family, right? With your own part-time jobs and things like that. So all of those things, and it just felt like I was part of that same family with her. I could completely relate. There's a whole, like when she was in high school, for example, she worked in a clothing store in kind of a rough part of town in the Bronx. And she says, you know, she and her titi would leave at night, and they'd pull down the grates over the store doors and walk through the streets. And at that time, this is of course in the 60s and 70s in New York, you know, there was police everywhere and crime and the whole notion of working in a community where she got to see all kinds of folks in the store and really understand their lives and what the community was like. And that felt to me, that could have been Junction Boulevard in Queens. That could have been any street that I was walking on. So there was just something about all of those experiences that were so ordinary. And so here comes this completely ordinary girl who didn't even like school when she was little. I love that about her even more than anything else, because we think, right, that you're going to become a Supreme Court justice. Oh my goodness. You've loved school. You've always had a big brain. No, she had to figure out how to be a good student. She had to go and decide that she was going to ask the smartest girl in her class to teach her how to study and how to be better at things. She had to force herself to practice, to speak in front of people. So all of those things, that she wasn't immediately a star, that she had to figure out what her own light was and how to shine. Those things were the things that really resonated for me as a fellow Latina.
That's incredible. And I know Fely has another question for you all about your own personal experiences.
Yes, and before I jump into the question, I just want to hear, I heard voice, I heard connections, I heard telling your story, having that voice, being that advocate for our students, right? Like having these books in our classroom, because our students are going to see themselves in these characters. The three of you talk about this connection with the characters in your books, but when our babies, our students see those connections, that's when the magic happened. And for us as teachers, hey, we might have the next jueza in our classroom, the next bailarina in our classroom. And it's all about perspective. And it's all about telling our kids that they need to persist. They have a dream, you go for it. And you don't stop until you achieve your dream. So, muchas gracias por estar aquí. And I'm so excited. Mira, I'm super excited. But with that in mind, I would like to start with our first question. And our first question is, have you personally ever experienced inequities or discrimination based on your gender? And what impact did that have on you?
Well, can I jump in? I'm going to just say, because I'm probably the oldest one of the three of us here, right? So I'm of the age that I was a young teenager in the 70s when the women's movement was gaining a lot of steam in New York when I was growing up. And so it was, Ms. Magazine had just started to publish, and women were on parades, you know, in the street. Bella Abzug with her big bullhorn, calling for people to take to the streets and demand equality. I'm of that era where people could say really casually awful things to women. You run like a girl. Girls don't play that kind of sport. They don't sound that way. They don't do those things, all of that. And so it was sort of just like a background straitjacket is what it really felt like. And so when I look at young women today, and they, like the Olympics, for example, that just finished, right? And all of the sports that are possible because of Title IX, right? Laws that women before you marched on the street to get passed for you so that you could do what you want to do, right? And the work's not done. The work's not done. Everybody, it's like one of those great baton races, right? One generation takes it to the next, and then you take the spaces that are still there and you go forward from there. But that's what it felt like to me, that it was just pervasive, just this less than, all of these rules about what women could do and couldn't do, and so on. And luckily, I was growing up at a time when all of that was breaking apart.
I love Meg, what she shared about the work not being done. When I think about some of the areas where I see a disparity, one that comes to mind is the pay gap. Even today as a children's book author, you'll kind of hear that male authors are paid more for the same kind of appearances. And so, what can we do about that? We can talk about it openly. We can advocate. And I have friends that are putting clauses in their contracts to say that, they need to be paid at the same rate as other speakers. And so I think, to tie back into what Meg was sharing about that baton being passed, we have to realize that we're part of this movement to create change. And it's not something that's going to be quick and easy. It's not going to be smooth. There's going to be bumps and hills and mountains that we have to climb. And we have to draw strength from those who have come before, and have faith that, with our bravery and our brilliance, that we're going to shine and that we're going to make it better for the next generation.
Such great advice. Oh my goodness. It is all of our responsibilities to truly empower one another and to amplify each other's voices. For example, we have an incredible community member, Ramesh Langani. He created a space to amplify 1,000 women in STEAM on our platform called Flipgrid. And people can learn about these incredible women and the work that they do in the field today. I'm going to share my screen really quickly to show you how beautiful this page is. So let's see if we can make that happen. There it is. So look at this. We have so many women across the board. There's women on our team, women from so many different countries in STEM-related fields that a student, a teacher, anyone really can learn about them and their role. So, I also think it is really important for us to just go back and think about, like, what are we putting in front of our students' faces? Like, are they able to not only see people of the past, but people right now who are making history, right? So when we look at those faces in the group, you see people that are typically not amplified in the STEM-related fields, right? So my question to you all is, because you chose to write about these incredible women of various backgrounds and ethnicities and cultures, why do you feel cultural representation matters when it comes to these stories, even for Women's History Month?
I can start this time. Yeah. So I think that it's important to make sure that all kids can see themselves, see their friends and families, see their cultures represented. When you think about, put yourself in the shoes of a child who's in a class and in the required reading never sees anybody who looks like, them. Think about what that does to your spirit. how invisibility can be stifling and suffocating and devastating, and can make you feel like you don't matter. And so it's so essential to make sure that we center Black women, Native women, all women of color, so that kids can see that we value everyone, that everyone's voices should be shared, that books are not strangers, books are friends. Books should give you a sense of home and a sense of comfort, along with introducing you to different worlds and to different people. As Dr. Radine Sims Bishop talks about, that's often quoted, that metaphor of books being windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. We want kids to be able to, along with seeing into other cultures, we want them to be able to see themselves and to know that they can tell their own stories, and there's space for that, and that is not just something they can do, but something that will be celebrated.
Beautiful.
I'm going to piggyback on that and just say, when you don't have enough stories that feature an inclusive group of people, right? You start to create and feed into a stereotype that exceptional people don't exist within that group. So right now, the most recent statistics had it like Latino books that feature Latino characters by or about Latino characters are about 6% of all of children's books. That's a very small number compared to the fact that we're about 25%, right, of public school students, for example. So that's a really weird disconnect, and it happens to Latino students, but it happens certainly to Black students, to Asian students, American Indian students, et cetera, et cetera. Every group is really underrepresented. And I think what happens is just it creates cultural representation matters, because without it, it just creates the space where stereotypes can take hold. Mm-hmm. If we don't define, right, and authentically define and share our exceptional people, our heroes, our stories, our histories, then we run the risk of them getting erased or told incorrectly. And that's really dangerous, as Kelly said, for a kid's self-image, what a kid knows about the world and about themselves.
Yeah, there is danger in telling that single story or singular narrative. So I appreciate each of you stepping outside of that zone and sharing these beautiful stories with students around the world.
And how important it is for us as educators to become that bridge for our students to be known, to be discovered, and for everybody to appreciate who they are, what they're capable of, what language they speak, the color of their skin, and how amazing all of them are. And all of them together, because the beauty of this country we live in is that we might say that we have a lot of differences, but in reality, we're very similar, very, very similar. Our cultures are very similar. And with that similarity, we have love. And love needs to happen in every single one of these aspects for these kids.
Sure.
Y with that in mind, I love what you all share. Muchísimas gracias por este empoderamiento, not only for our girls, but also for our boys, because boys need to hear these stories too. I personally, as a mom of boys, this is a conversation that we have every day, because I feel I'm responsible for them to know all of this, what's happening for all of the girls, and say, hey, this is the way you're supposed to be. This is the way you're supposed to behave. And you empower girls, and you respect girls, and you not only empower, but celebrate, because at the end of the day, we're all the same. So women have played a vital role in history. Many voices have been minimized or silenced in our schools, our workplaces, and our communities, our families, our cultures. How does power, privileges, and bias impact the voices heard, stories told, And what can we do as educators, como educadores, families, and comunidades to change this? What can we do to change this?
I suppose it's sort of, as you said, these are conversations that should happen at multiple levels, right? You talking with your boys and in your family, and also teachers with their students. I just think that it's so important to have difficult conversations and to trust that kids are ready for them, and that kids are so smart and capable of imagining bright futures. And they just are so, they give me so much hope. I remember actually one of the stories that I kind of have told at school visits before is the fact that my first book, not She Persisted, Maria Tallchief, but my first book that I published, one of the comments I received from, reviewers was that there was some concern that this book, which had a really strong emphasis on an intergenerational family, the women in that family and the girls, and it was all told from a girl's perspective, and she had lots of girlfriends. And some folks were concerned that there was not enough boys within the story. But what I found when I went to school visits was that some of my most enthusiastic questions I would receive from students came from boys. And so I think that as long as kids are shown that these stories about people who are like them or unlike them, who share experiences they might have experienced, or who maybe they relate in other different ways, it is all just important to sort of give kids that space to have lots of different types of stories that they are exposed to, lots of different idols and mentors that they are exposed to, and that we just continue to do this work to sort of build empathy in each other and to share potentially difficult stories with kids because they are ready. So that's what I think.
I'm going to upvote all of that, and I'm going to add a simple trick, right? I really feel like as educators, as parents, I think it's a fairly simple thing to stand in front of the bookshelves that you have of materials that you offer to your students or to your children and ask yourself, who's there on that shelf? And then ask yourself, who's missing? And that's really at the crux of things, right? So if your kid loves adventure stories, like, do you have adventure stories from all kinds of points of view? The same thing for nonfiction, for fantasy, for anything. Who's there and who's not there? Because that communicates a sense of importance and a sense of belonging. So I would encourage educators to start with that. What are the stories that are missing? What do you need more of on your shelf? And go find those.
Simple and powerful advice. That's something we can all do every single day. Kelly, do you have anything that you wish to add?
Well, I was going to say, I definitely agree with both areas that were shared, and to build on what Meg just said, I think we have to really understand the power that we hold to help make a difference and be intentional with our selections. So, there was a few years back something called the Birthday Party Pledge, which I thought was really amazing, where if you're going to a birthday party, give a book that features someone from a different culture. That's a real easy way to start making a difference. If you see the reading list from your child's class and it's not featuring any Black authors or Native authors or, Latinx authors or Asian authors, ask and give a list of, books that could be added. So I think it's knowing that we can use our voice and even use our dollar in terms of the books that we are buying. Make sure you're buying books that are by creators from those different communities that are often overlooked. And that can make such a big impact and send a message to the school, to the publishing industry, what we value and what we want to see more of.
Yes, that is a perfect way to empower every single voice and be an advocate in our schools, in our libraries, in our communities, etc. So this has been such a powerful conversation. I mean, a pleasant surprise for me that we got really deep in some of these questions. And guess what? It doesn't have to end here, right? Our incredible partner at Penguin Young Readers has an incredible topic in the Discovery Library in Flipgrid called She Persisted Around the World for you to choose a woman to learn about and research and share 3 things that surprise you. So educators and families, that's ready to go for you to explore with your beautiful scholars. We'll make sure, let me see if I can pull up that image for you really quickly. Let's see, here we go. There it is. So this is what that topic looks like. You see that it has already been used by many classrooms and families around the world, and you can keep adding your voice and learning and sharing about the wonderful women that you selected to learn about.
Definitely. And it's simple. And if you really go back to it really quick, corazon, there is a button right there that says add topic. And I just want to add that with 3 topics, you're going to be able to add it to your group and have it ready for your boys and your girls, your community, your classroom, your students, your family, and let the conversation begin. Vamos a empezar a tener estas conversaciones que necesitamos en la mesa. We also have a feature collection to help you celebrate women's history throughout the year in your classroom. And it is also found in our Discovery Library. But go ahead, Jornea.
So I just wanted to pop in Penguin's page in our Discovery Library. So you'll not only see the topic we just shared, but look at this, a beautiful collection of many topics to celebrate women's history is ready to go for you. So definitely take some time, check out that series. I'll also show you, Fely just mentioned a little bit about our featured collection. So we're going to go hop into our Flipgrid Discovery Library, and here it is. And if you scroll down, you'll see right here, we have this featured collection called Celebrating Women's History. So in addition to the Penguin Young Readers topics, we have topics from other partners as well as our beautiful community members. So if you want to educate more people about women's history, maybe even some challenges when it comes to women's rights and equity, go ahead and submit those topics to Discovery, and we will be glad to amplify them.
And this is definitely a conversation that needs to happen throughout the entire year in our classroom, every day at home, y siempre en nuestro corazón. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been an honor. It's been amazing. I was like, like when you're so excited that you have so many words in your brain, you're like, do I say them in English? Do I say them in Spanish? But I love these conversations. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for writing this, for representing our kids, our students, our future, our voice. Muchísimas gracias a cada una de ustedes. And I go back, Jornea, back to you.
So thank you, Christine, Meg, and Kelly. And to our community, as always, we appreciate all that you do every single day to make a choice to empower every voice. And we're always here to support you. And remember to be who you are and share what you love, and let's learn together. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.